Hello, this is Mike Madden and you're listening to the Arts Show podcast. Here you will find interviews with artists, musicians, authors and anyone else in and around the arts. Some of the interviews are recorded direct from the Arts Show on Expat Radio, with one or two specials in between. Today my guest is best-selling author Caroline England. Caroline talks about her latest book, Betray Her, and she gives some fantastic advice to prospective authors. Good morning, everybody. On the podcast this morning, I'm talking to Caroline England. Good morning, Caroline.
Morning, Mike. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
It's a lovely sunny day out there, so I'm feeling good. Spring is on the way.
We were even considering taking the covers off the garden furniture this morning.
Oh, wow. That's a bit extreme.
It is. I think we get a bit giddy because it's going to be 16 degrees.
Wow, that's great, isn't it?
Yeah. So you're on to talk about your latest book, which is a title called Betray Her, which is out in March. Yes. So just tell our listeners a little bit about that book.
Well, that's a little bit tricky, actually, because I'm really pleased because I hate spoilers. And I think the blurb on a lot of books gives too much away, and I don't like that, so I sort of don't even read them. So what they've done with Betray Her is they've been just quite intriguing, with not saying a great deal. But obviously the title Betray Her gives a bit away, doesn't it? And it just, the blurb says something like, you've been friends forever, you've done everything for your friend, you've always been there for her. But if you could, she has it all, she's always had it all, but if you could take it for yourself, would you? So they've left it quite intriguing, which I'm really pleased about. But obviously it's going to be about friendship and betrayal.
And so following on from your earlier books, which we'll discuss in a moment, would you put that in the genre of domestic noir?
Yes, very much in the domestic noir genre again, slash psychological thriller. So they're very much, it's on Amazon as a dark psychological thriller. But I think those who like the psychological thriller genre know it's like your Gone Girl and Girl on a Train and all those sort of books. Whereas I think some people think thriller is more guns and action and whatnot. But in the context of psychological, I think everyone knows it's more a thriller, as in intrigue and page turning and oh my word, what's happening next type of read.
Yeah, and I think it's quite important that you do establish exactly what genre it's in, because Amazon can be a little confusing. I know your previous books have figured heavily in gay romance, Irish, domestic, and it's kind of, it doesn't exactly say what they're about, but they're just Amazon categories.
Indeed, yeah. I mean, they're a little hint, because obviously you couldn't have them in those categories if there wasn't an element of that. But I think some people, some fellow writers sort of go, oh, wow, I didn't know I was whatever category. So I think, for example, the Irish category, I think that came in because in books 1 and 2, I had Irish characters who came from an Irish background, even though it wasn't set in Ireland. So if someone was expecting a sort of scenic Irish story, they may have been misled.
They may
the hint is there, isn't it?
Yeah, and it is just a hint. It's just an Amazon category, and there seems to be more and more of those. So this book is out in March on Kindle. Now, it's your first book with Piatkus Books,
yes.
a new publisher for you.
Yes.
So just describe the publishing journey with Piatkus, because it's not all coming out at once.
No. The plan is with Piatkus, it's sort of a little bit stretched out, which is slightly frustrating from my point of view because I get so giddy. But what the plan is it will come out in about 3 weeks now on Kindle, 14th of March. Then it won't be out until September in paperback, and that will be the trade paperback, which is the larger size. And the reason they've done that is because they are targeting the Australian, South African and New Zealand markets where they do the bigger size books, which I quite like because when you get sort of a little bit older and that whole eye thing goes on, it's quite nice to get a slightly bigger print. So it will be out in September with the bigger print, the bigger size book, the trade paperback. And then after that, it will be in the UK next year in the normal size paperback. And hopefully at that stage, if the publishers are successful, it will be in supermarkets and whatnot at that stage. But if people don't want the Kindle, want to wait for the paperback, and they don't mind the larger size, that will be available to order from bookshops or on Amazon in September.
So the trade paperback is kind of good because you can get hold of that in larger print without admitting it's because of your eyes.
Yes. that is a good point. Yes. You could just add like big books. It's like a hardback size, but it's softback hardback, which is quite good because hardbacks are lovely, aren't they? But they're a bit sort of hard, which is self-explanatory, isn't it?
Yeah, you can't fold them into suitcases easily. They do take up physical space.
Yeah. And of course, a lot of people these days read on Kindles anyway. So all the Kindle readers can get in there early.
Well, and I guess that's it's very true that if anybody was thinking about getting into ebooks, this is a very good opportunity to get there and get the book several months before the paperback comes out.
Yes. So
is the audiobook out at the same time?
I think, I'm not quite sure what happens with the audio. I suspect that will be when the paperback comes out next year, possibly. But that is a question I need to ask again. Because I know you've been a fan, haven't you, of audio of late?
I have. I've spent many, many hours listening to audiobooks, driving to Leeds, which fortunately I no longer have to do, but I've carried on with audiobooks. And now I sort of sit in the same room as my wife listening to an audiobook while she's watching some mindless drivel on the TV. But she doesn't realise I'm listening, so she keeps interrupting, which is quite frustrating. It's all right, she won't listen to this.
That's good togetherness, though. At least you're together.
Yes, and it's it is very much an up-and-coming medium, the audiobook.
Yes,
so,
yeah, well, it is. I believe so. I believe it's the way everyone's going at the moment. So that's great.
Well, I listened to your Beneath the Skin on audiobook, and it was a fabulous experience.
Oh, that's excellent. It's good to know. Is it easy to follow chapters? Do you know, do they say chapter 28 or do they just carry on reading the actor or actress?
They do actually say chapter 28, chapter 29. However, when you're listening to it, you get absorbed and you don't even notice they've changed chapter. You really don't. Oh. You follow the plot, the story, and after a few miles, somebody might say chapter 16 and you think, what happened to the previous 5 chapters? But it's kind of an incidental part of the journey.
I think it's a great thing. I don't tend to go on a lot of long car journeys, but I think next time I'm on a flight, which I hate, I think it'd be a great thing to get an audio book. Because it's more, because if you're reading and you're squashed up, aren't you, with your book and so on. Whereas if you're just listening, that's a great way to pass time, isn't it?
It is, and one of my previous interviews was with an author who said it would be fantastic for hospitals as well to have a selection of audiobooks for the patients who can't move, to just be sort of fed audiobooks.
That is an absolutely great idea, isn't it? Because I think it's the boredom for a lot of people in hospital, isn't it? So that's a good way to pass the time in an enjoyable way, hopefully enjoyable.
So, and audio books are obviously available through Amazon and the Audible platform, which I remember doing a trial with Audible several years ago, and I just thought it's not for me, this. But now, I've undertaken an Audible trial that's expired. I carry on getting a credit per month, and I've just bought an audiobook which was worth £48. I think is the sale price of the audiobook, but I get it for 1 credit, which is fantastic.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, that's great to know. You're a convert, clearly.
Absolutely a convert. I was quite an early convert to Kindle, but probably a little bit late to the party with audiobooks. But I'm definitely a fan. So going back to your earlier career, you actually studied law in Manchester and became a divorce lawyer in a firm of solicitors. So has that inspired some of your characters? I know certainly in Beneath the Skin there must have been something there.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it was obviously when I qualified. I decided when I did my articles or was a trainee, I did sort of mainly divorce work and crime, and I think they've both come to the fore because although my books aren't crime as in a crime procedural or that type of thing, they do often have some hidden crime in. And so that was great to meet lots of criminals and, see things from their point of view, because often even criminals aren't bad people per se. They're sort of misguided people or they've lost their way, etc. And then the divorce work as well. For some reason, I decided once I qualified that I wanted to, be a divorce lawyer and just do divorce work. And looking back, I'm not sure why, because in your early 20s, it's a bit of a shocker, bit of an eye-opener to discover what goes on behind closed doors. But it's been wonderful fodder for my books. But also to get between, divorce is a really difficult time, and it's all about layers of emotion and human beings as we are. We're all so much the same in many ways, but so different in many ways. And we all have these complications and emotions and layers. And I love to peel back all those layers and see what's going on beneath the skin.
What a brilliant line.
I'm not as good as you, Mike.
Dave did me on Monday. Toto and Rosanna. So I had to start rambling on about Follow the Yellow Brick Road.
Oh, tricky one.
So I guess with studying divorce so closely, you get to see what those wrinkles are. Because a divorce is probably not a single event. It's a kind of a build up to the separation, the split, the differences. And I suppose that's helped you to construct the plots in your novels. These little wrinkles that start off very small but then grow and grow.
Yes, yeah, and I think that's I think this sort of genre, crime in general, but particularly this genre, because you're doing a very slow reveal. Well, not too slow, because you want people to turn the page, but you don't want to give everything up front in any way. So slowly, you're just dripping all the secrets out and what's gone on behind, historically. And you're building these layers and then slowly stripping them away again. And it's quite, I suppose, an art form in a way, because you've got to hold back the whole time when you want to tell your reader things, but you haven't. You've got to hold yourself back and stretch it out. And it's a tricky thing, but and it is, like you say, I was obviously helped by all these backstories. Not that I've used anyone's particular backstory. It's more to do with just understanding human emotion and frailties and the moral grey area, which is the area I love to explore. Because my characters, I don't think any of them are completely evil. They're not completely good or bad. It's that moral grey area where they've been shaped by nurture, nature, circumstances, life's experiences, like we all have.
Yeah, and with the layers as you describe them, it's something that any aspiring authors out there can learn a lot from, because it's not about telling a flat story. It is about dipping back in time, building the character, getting a backstory, and it's very difficult to do that whilst you're just telling a flat A to B story.
Yeah, it is difficult. And also, I'm a member of a writers group, and often we say to each other, oh, that's a bit of an info dump. And obviously it's where you want to get a backstory in or something. And it's tempting just to put 2 pages worth of backstory because you want your reader to know that. But it then feels dumb, it feels like you're just telling. And of course, we need to show, don't we, in writing, rather than just tell. So you need to eke it out and try and thread it through. And it is quite tricky in many ways. But that's what hopefully makes the reader continue to turn the page.
Yeah, the idea of show not tell is probably one of the most important things that an aspiring author needs to take note of.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's difficult when people first said to me, show not tell. And I think I used to think, well, what does that mean? But I think the easiest way to describe it is when you're watching a TV program or a film, it's all the things you see and you're not being told. So it's sort of seeing it rather than hearing it in a weird way.
Yeah, you've got to give your reader the same experience as if he was watching the events happening rather than you describing them. Uh,
Yes,
you know,
yeah,
there's a great quote from Anton Chekhov doing the rounds on social media at the moment, which says, "Don't tell me the moon is shining. Show me the glint of light on broken glass." And it's that descriptive nature of an
yes,
event happening.
yes. But of course, again, it's genre, isn't it? Because in, say, crime or psychological thrillers, domestic noir, you obviously want to be descriptive, but you don't want to dwell too long. Whereas a literary book would perhaps spend pages describing beautifully emotions and scenes and events. Whereas there has to be a certain amount of pace, doesn't there, with crime fiction? So it's getting that balance right, I guess.
Yes, indeed. So you studied law and you worked for a divorce as a divorce lawyer. What was it that actually made you begin writing and think that you could make a career out of it?
Well, I guess I was a partner in a firm of solicitors in Manchester, and then children come along. So I think that just changes your priority. So I went down from a 5-day job to 4 days, and then eventually I went to a job share, and I did the 2 days, and a colleague and a friend did 3 days. And actually, that was great. But I think it just eventually wound down to the part where it was sort of easy to be a stay-at-home mum for a while. And I think for me it was a work ethic type of thing. I felt, other than obviously looking after my 3 girls, I felt as though I wanted to do something, and I'd always liked writing, and I'd always done poems and whatnot. And I sort of thought, well, come on, this is the time to actually put, pen to paper and actually start writing stuff. In fairness, I had started writing a novel at my desk when I was still a solicitor, but don't tell anyone. But then I sort of expanded, and my main thing was short stories to begin with, poems, and my poems weren't great, I don't think, but short stories. And in fact, I have a collection out of those very short stories called Watching Horsepats Feed the Roses. And they all veer to the dark side. I can't help myself. Very, very black humour in there, with little twists and whatnot. And but also I wrote I sort of just in 1 year, I suddenly thought, oh, I love this. And I wrote about 3 or 4 just first drafts of novels in 1 year and just got them all down. And of course, the first draft, isn't it? You have to redraft a million times. But it was great. When the urge was there, I just did it. So for any of your listeners out there who want to write, it's just if you've got the ideas, just start it and write something down. It may be rubbish to begin with, but I think once it's on paper, it can start taking shape.
I think you're right. I think there are a lot of opportunities out there to write. For instance, just start a blog or a newsletter. It's so easy to get that out there online these days. But poetry is an interesting one because I think poetry, more than any other writing form, is very subjective. Some people might think it's brilliant. Some people might think it's rubbish. Not everybody's going to be a poet laureate, but again, it's all about emotion, and it's a very small and quick way to express your emotion.
I agree. I think it's really. I really enjoyed writing my poems. I've not written one for a long time, but I think it is if you've suffered a bereavement or of mum, dad, sibling, or the family pet. It's a really good way. It's to get those emotions out. And like you say, it's subjective. I don't think it matters if it's good or bad. If you're getting it down on the page. And for example, when my mum died many years ago, I wrote letters to her. And that was, again, the same sort of form of the writing, to write out emotion and feelings and how you're missing someone. So that was another form of writing. And I think it really helps.
So you mentioned your short story collection, Watching Horsepats Feed the Roses, which was originally written in, I think it was 2012.
Yes.
But you've actually got that into publication now.
Yes.
It's out on Kindle, and I believe you're trying to get it through on paperback as well.
It's now actually available on paperback, so you can order both on Amazon. And it's 12 stories. It's described as 12 cameos of cruelty or something like that. But it's not cruelty as in anything bad like that. But it's just a sort of twist in the tail type of stories, like Roald Dahl's stories. If anyone remembers Tales of the Unexpected. They're just little nuggets like that where it's, again, there's a sort of slow reveal and then somewhat of a twist to find out what's really going on. But they're just bite-sized, so they're easy to read on a train or that type of thing.
Yeah,
And I'm going to do another collection in a couple of months of similar things.
Right. Well, that's something to look forward to. I have read a couple of them myself, and then, as you say, they're more Roald Dahl than perhaps Stephen King horror. They are sort of edging towards the dark side, but not in a manic Stephen King way.
No, yeah. They're more, and they're sort of a more thoughtful. You might finish the story and think, and have a little think about it afterwards.
And there's also, I didn't expect that to happen, is probably going to cross your mind.
Yes.
So after you originally wrote Watching Horsepats Feed the Roses, which you've brought up to date for 2019, you wrote a novel called Lie With Me Under the Toothbrush Tree, which was shortlisted in 2015 for the Impress Prize.
Yes, yeah.
And you also wrote Time Is of the Essence in the Pulp Idol finals.
Yes.
So what happened to those two pieces?
Well, I do actually have. I've written 12 novels, and I've started the 13th, and I've actually called it 13 because I'm dreadful at titles. So the 13 is the working title for it. So the first one was a sort of a chick lit set in a solicitor's office one, and that actually went and came on Kindle back in, I think, 2013. So then I've now had my 3 published. The one you were saying, Lie With Me Under the Toothbrush Tree, that's been renamed, and it's called, I think, The Lying Game now, it might be called. No, The Truth Game. And that might be the next one, Piatkus Publishers, but they've got quite a few to choose from. I've got about another, say, 5 of that sort of genre for them to choose from. So who knows? That's quite exciting. And then the one you mentioned of Time Is of the Essence, that's part of 2 books. And they are, I suppose, legal thriller is the way, but it's to do with a feisty feminist solicitor who works in a local, where I live, Didsbury office. And it's just about her trials and tribulations of the cases she comes across, and everything tends to go wrong, and she's got a broken heart. And so it's sort of, in the round, it's an interesting follow the story of Natalie Batch in her life, but also coming across all these legal cases she can, which obviously are nice things like attempted murder or murder and that type of stuff. So hopefully one day they will see the light of day and get published too.
And it's very interesting that I've just mentioned 2 books from 2015, 2016. Your short stories were 2012. So there's never a deadline for these things. You shouldn't give up on them. Who knows what might happen?
Well, exactly. I'd say to anybody, it's good to have, if you're looking one day to get published or to get a literary agent as a first step, have as much backlog as you can, because some things will be better than others and some things you can develop later and come back to. So although sometimes I think for writers who are not getting anywhere, I think you just think, what is the point? I think we've all been there thinking, why are we doing this? But my advice to anyone would be just to carry on. It's so annoying having to put one novel to bed, but start on the next one or the next short story or the next poem. And then you've got a catalogue backlog. And if you are lucky and get a publishing contract, you've already got them in hand rather than having to write to order. Because I'd hate that. I mean, so many of my friends have 2 or 3 book deals and they haven't got the 2nd or 3rd book written yet. And I personally wouldn't want the pressure of having to come up with a great idea and get it finished, the deadlines. That must be very stressful.
Like you said earlier, the first draft is just that. It's a first draft, but at least it's there. You've got some kind of outline, you've got a structure, you've got characterizations. it's probably a long way from being finished, but you're halfway there maybe, or maybe a third of the way there.
Yeah, I personally really like having done a first draft because I don't plot particularly. So once that first draft is there, that is basically your plot, isn't it? And then you can work at it and change it. I think we all think our first draft is brilliant at the time. You think, yes, I've done it. It's brilliant. But for many of us, it won't be and needs a lot of work.
Indeed, I remember writing a first draft, a first paragraph, and my editor ripped it to shreds, and I was very disappointed. But but she was absolutely right, you know.
Yes, yeah.
I think sometimes you can get too close to your own writing, and that's why when you get deals with people like Piatkus or Avon, the amount of work that they put in is at least equal and probably far greater than what you do yourself.
Yes, I mean it's very much a collaboration, isn't it? Once you get there, you collaborate with your editor, and some things you agree on, some things you don't agree on. But it is great to have that because obviously you can get beta readers, can't you? But often they're just readers, whereas these editors, they sort of know what will work in terms of sales as well. So they're obviously a beta reader. They're coming back and giving you advice and everything, but they know whether it reads well, but whether it will sell well as well. So that's why they're so good at their art.
Yes, I think that's very important that the people at Avon or Piatkus will have published books before. They know what sells, and no matter how good you think it is or your beta readers think it is, they're the ones who have to put it on the bookshelves.
Yeah, and they're very keen to try and cut out any unnecessary bits. You know, when you've written a lovely, beautiful section and they sort of go, no, pace, and you think, oh no, don't cut it out. But they're quite right because it's a balance, isn't it?
It is. I remember reading a Dean Koontz novel. I didn't read it. I listened to it, and it was a very fast-paced novel. But he had this obsession with describing the weather, and I don't know. I just thought it was too much. I just thought it slowed the pace down completely every time he had to describe the weather.
Yeah. I think it's. I read a thriller recently, and it's a very, very successful author. I mean, she's an international bestseller, but it had a lot of changing nappies and whatnot because the character had a baby. Now, obviously, I've changed nappies and whatnot, but I felt for some readers, perhaps they would like less information about changing nappies because I know obviously mums have to change nappies, but it was mentioned a lot. But she's a mega bestseller, so obviously a lot of people didn't mind the nappies. But yeah, there you go.
So you wrote a lot of books, and you must have gone through that cycle of rejections, and then you got an agent. So that must have been an exciting time.
Oh, tremendously so. I mean, like everybody else who writes and tries to get a literary agent, for many years I sent out my first 3 chapters and a synopsis, and you get those standard letters back. And just occasionally you get a slightly nicer letter back. Then as time went on and I think my writing improved, when it came to Beneath the Skin, I was getting more, can you send us the full manuscript? And obviously that's exciting. And then can you send us, and then it would go to a next round. And it got to quite a few rounds, quite a few times, and then it was knocked back. But the knockback would often, after it going to be read by several different people, would just be the standard no thank you. And it'd be a little frustrating because you'd think, wow, it got so far. Can't you please just tell me why? But obviously they're busy people, aren't they, agents? And they have people submitting hundreds and hundreds of manuscripts every day. So then, and I managed through submitting a short story to eventually, through a slightly convoluted route, to get the agent I have now, Kate Johnson, who's brilliant. And she's a wonderful lady, and I'm so pleased to have her. My agent.
So you got an agent, and when you talk about the types of rejections you got, you obviously got a lot of thanks but no thanks, but also you got to these additional rounds, and then thanks but no thanks. But at least that's got us past the renowned slush pile. So would you give? Is there any advice you could give somebody to avoid the slush pile?
I think this isn't, and I know we had a debate in my writers group who all were going, oh, no, this is the way you do a synopsis. But I think, obviously, with a synopsis, you have to, in as few words as you can, tell the whole story, which is really hard to do. Synopsis, they're so difficult to do. But I think at the end of the day, you're trying to catch someone's attention. And literary agents or the people who they will have readers to go through the slush pile, they're human as well. So they want something to really catch their attention. So I think maybe it's your covering letter. Really, really try and hook them in with your covering letter. So then they will look at that and think, oh, maybe I will read the synopsis. Then maybe I will read the 3 chapters. So I think as hooky as you can be. And maybe look at taglines on books, because that's a good guidance. Because publishers are great at just coming up with this tagline of about, 8 or 10 words, which sort of almost summarises the whole book, but gives you a flavour. So I feel in your covering letter, get that tagline in, hook whoever's reading the letter, and then hopefully they'll want to go further.
So I think that's very good advice, particularly about the first thing that they pick up, because if you go and buy a book from a W.H. Smith or a Waterstones, you're attracted to the book by either the cover or the 8 words on the cover, and that's exactly what the agent will see, those 8 words, before they decide to go any further. So I think that's fantastic advice.
There's a blurb, there's a longer blurb on the back, obviously, but just a lot of them do it now on the cover. 8 just words, where they'll put, I can't think, for example, let me pick up my book. For example, My Husband's Lies, in fact, it's 1, 2, 4 words. On the front cover just says, everyone has a secret, ... So just that everyone has a secret, that will give people immediately just a clue, won't it?
Yeah, it will.
What type of read it's going to be.
Yes, it's drawn them in straight away, and their next bit is probably to flip it over and read what's on the back. But you've got them in at that point. Yes.
Yeah. So, for example, My Husband's Lies, you then flip it over, and then they've got in heavy type. Do you really know your friends? Well, immediately, if you can get some little taglines going like that, I think, in your covering letter, it will at least make them think, oh, I will read more.
So you got accepted by your agent, and that as we say, that's a fantastic achievement in itself. But it's not all over at that point, because you've still got to get a publisher.
Yes, yeah, I think that's the trouble. It's a 2 sort of prong attack, isn't it? Because I think everyone feels sort of naively you've got it made once you get your literary agent. And I was quite lucky, because she didn't take long, Kate, to get me the offer from HarperCollins. But I know some people have been taken on by the very top literary agents in the country, and they just never managed to place the material, which must be so demoralising when you really think you've got it made, and you're with this big literary agency who so influential, but they just can't place it. So yeah, it's all to do again. Once your literary agent has your manuscript, he or she has to go round the houses again. Submitting, I don't quite know how they do it, whether they submit the whole manuscript or just a part, but they're again having to give taglines and entice publishers to read more. So it's the same process again, but obviously they have more clout. That's the difference.
Yeah, indeed. They would have the ear of the publisher, who is ultimately responsible for getting the book out there. So obviously you got past that stage. You got your agent, you got your publisher, and then Beneath the Skin was launched in October 2017. So having been a sort of a divorce lawyer to now being a successfully published author, what was the launch like?
Obviously the whole build-up was tremendously exciting, but it's quite a slow process. So you get your literary agent, then you get your publisher, and then it's a great big year goes by where you're sort of secretly so excited, but nothing happens for a long time. So I think if anyone's going to go into this process, bear in mind the traditional publishing way is very slow. But obviously it was wonderful, and I had once it was out, I had a launch with family and friends, and everyone was so warm, and it was fabulous. And that's a high. And I went in it with my ambition was to get a book, my own book on my bookcase. And obviously I achieved that ambition, but then you get all the worries about, is it going to sell? Is anyone going to buy it? So then other things kick in that you never even thought about. But you suddenly want more. You think that's it. Your dream has come true, and then you sort of gradually want more. And it's terribly greedy and awful, but I think we're all a bit like that, aren't we?
Absolutely, and it's a second career almost for you. So you've given your first career up. You've decided that writing is your career, and you are successful at it. So you do want more.
Yeah.
So this was domestic noir, and I don't really go for that genre, but because I was interviewing you, I thought I better have a look.
Yes, that's it. Yeah, do your homework, young man.
And I read a lot of books, and I love Stephen King for his storytelling ability. But actually, when I look at quality of writing, it was the quality of the writing that kept me engaged with your book. And the punch at the end, I was absolutely stunned, but I won't go into that because I don't want to give anything away. But yeah, I think the quality of the writing. So what contributes to the quality of your writing? You've obviously got an ability to do it, but how do you get it to the best it can possibly be?
Well, first of all, thank you for saying that. That's really that I love over everything when people say the writing's good. That's thrilling. I love that. So thank you, and I'll give you the tenner later.
I'm not editing that out.
I don't really know. I mean, a lot of people go on creative writing courses and they learn the art of creative writing. And good luck to all those people that do that, because it's expensive apart from anything else. So fantastic that people are willing to do that. But I'm a bit, I didn't want to go back to the classroom again. I'd sort of done enough education. So I think it's just, I just read quite a lot and I just did it. And I think you just, along the way, there were people who helped, I guess, with my style. And they'd say, oh, well, you are telling too much and not showing enough, or, you're making it too clumpy with backstory or whatever. So you do learn as you go along. And I went to a writers group in Manchester, and now I'm at a local writers group just near where I live. And that's all dreadfully helpful. But I think we all just develop styles. It's strange, isn't it? I don't know if there's any magical answer, but I think it is just obvious things as well for people who are writing. Repetition, you don't realise you're repeating words a lot, and it makes it heavy. So try and make writing as light as you can, I guess.
Yeah, a good thesaurus, I think, helps with a lot of things.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
So your debut novel mentions many places in South Manchester. So do you stick to the original setting of South Manchester, or do you have to create places, or do you stay true to what actually South Manchester is?
Well, I've stuck fairly true, but I think, as you know, I had some scenes set in a place called Withington, which is in South Manchester. And in Beneath the Skin, the men gathered in a pub there. And funnily enough, it's the pub that I went to as a student, my husband went to as a student, and my daughters all go there now. So it's one of those pubs that everybody goes to. But I didn't want to offend anyone by calling it by its real name, because I thought, well, the real landlord or landlady, that they might think, hey, hold on here. Certainly wouldn't want to get sued. So I called it a different name. But everyone who knows South Manchester all said, that's not that, that's the other pub. Yeah. So everyone knew which it was. So that was fine. And anyone who doesn't live in this area, it doesn't matter to them, does it? But I personally like to sort of hang my hat on real places, real pubs, real areas, real personalities. But having said that, the one I'm just starting to write at the moment, and I don't know where it's going, it has a vicar in it. And at the moment I've set it locally, but I think that I will eventually change where it's set, because that's a bit personal, isn't it? There aren't that many vicars around, are there?
No, there aren't.
You've got to be careful as well, haven't you? You don't have to go offending people.
No, there was a very sort of a nice distraction in the audiobook, if you like, because obviously I'm from South Manchester originally, and I know all the places around there. And then there's a place called Cheadle Hulme. But the narrator of the audiobook obviously didn't know Cheadle Hulme and called it Cheadle Hulme.
That's funny.
So I thought, I wonder how many people will pick up on that. But it didn't detract from the overall experience, so it was absolutely fine.
Gave you a smile.
It did indeed. So after that was published, you then had My Husband's Lies, which was your next book with Avon. But you at the time thought that was your last book, and it was certainly your last book with Avon. How did you approach that one in terms of a launch event and what you had to do afterwards?
Well, pretty much the same, really, in terms of the build-up. There was a possibility, I guess, I might have stayed with Avon, but after My Husband's Lies came out, it really took off, and it kept going higher and higher in the Kindle chart, which was really exciting. And it got to number 4 overall of paid Kindle books. So that was amazing, to see it in that place. And so then it was a question of would I stay with Avon or would I go to a new publisher? And Avon did come back and say, oh yeah, well, we'll do another on a similar basis, but it was basically digital first with print on demand. And but at the same time, I was offered by Piatkus a traditional publishing deal. And that's what I really wanted, the traditional way, even though it's going to be, as we explained at the beginning of the programme, quite a long drawn out process. And I've been very happy at Piatkus so far. I have an editor called Anna, and she's fabulous, really fabulous. It's been very much a collaboration, and my cover reveal came out on Tuesday. And she took such care to get it right, and we liaised with all different versions of the cover. There were 2 options, and then when we narrowed it down to one option, and then we had a big debate about colours, and it was fabulous, really great.
I've seen it. I can agree that it is a fabulous cover.
Yeah, because it's quite simple, isn't it? But it's quite intriguing, and it tells you a lot.
Well, again, it focuses on the words, and it is quite a minimalist graphic on the cover, but it makes you focus on the words and the title.
Yeah, and that one of it has a sort of 2 cutout girls, doesn't it, yeah, on the cover, and then one of the cutout girls has a sort of a rip going through her. So I think the artist at Little Brown has done a marvellous job. So I'm really pleased.
Now, you mentioned digital first with Avon and print on demand. So in your world, just explain what that means, because print on demand for instance, an independent author means it's there on Amazon, but it doesn't exist today, but it can still be delivered to your house tomorrow. But I think print on demand is slightly different with the likes of Avon, in that they can...
Yeah. I think although it's technically classed as print on demand, I think for My Husband's Lies, although, as I say, that was a technical description of it, they still had a lot of books around. So I think it was sort of a hybrid between traditional and print on demand, because and it's in Asda stores now, My Husband's Lies. So it sort of didn't, as you say, the self-publishing route on Amazon is literally they print it for you when you want it. Whereas I think with big publishers, it's called that, but it's slightly different. I'm not being very helpful here, I'm afraid, but I think it is slightly different.
No, and I think it is print on demand in terms of probably Amazon. It'll be fulfilled by them, but in terms of, for instance, Asda, they would have to strike a deal with Asda to get it on their bookshelves, and that would be a set number of books to put on their shelves.
Yes, yeah. Which is the supermarkets are. I was so pleased they did get it in the supermarkets, because apparently authors are finding it increasingly difficult to get books in. I think the supermarkets are decreasing the amounts they have in. And also they are hugely influential. I know some authors who've had to change their cover because the supermarkets have said, no, we're not stocking it with that cover. So that's astonishing, isn't it, that they have such power?
So,
But obviously they're the experts. They know what sells, don't they?
they
So
do indeed, yeah. And their shelf space, when you see people trying to place new products in supermarkets, their shelf space is very valuable because of the footfall.
yes.
So be honest now. How many Asdas have you been in since you found your book there?
Well, funnily enough, all the ads, I only about three, but I went to a couple in Stockport, and they didn't have any in those two. And then I tried the Trafford Centre one, and they didn't have any there. And I was giving up hope, but then someone told me the Altrincham Asda, which is a fairly new one, had it in.
Right.
So I had to go, didn't I?
Of course.
Picture, for the shelfie, as they call it.
It's the phenomenon of the shelfie.
Yeah.
So, are you one who studies all of the reviews that come in for your books, and you're constantly up and down the Amazon rankings to see where you are?
I think when Beneath the Skin came out, which is now, incidentally, if anyone's looking for it, as a Kindle download, it's called The Wife's Secret. So it's a bit, it's the only book with two titles, I think. I did a little bit there, and of course, when you're a new author, you get a bit obsessed with star accreditations and whatnot. And the trouble is, if you get a 1 star, I think that's fair enough. People are entitled to their opinions, but it brings down your overall rating quite quickly. So you might have got a lot of 4 and 5 star reviews, and what 1 star brings it down quite quickly. And I think if that's a genuine review of someone who didn't like it, but you get some trolls who just write nothing just to give you a 1 star. I don't know why people do it. And then some others, for example, with Beneath the Skin, there's one review, but I like it. I tell everyone about it. And this lady put, "This book was so dreadful, I burned after reading because I didn't want anyone else to suffer like I have." And so I thought, well, this is a bit extreme. So I sort of clicked on a name and thought, oh, right, what else has she reviewed? Well, Beneath the Skin was the only book she'd ever reviewed. And all her other reviews were for candles. They were for Yankee candles. So I just thought, well, it's quite a funny story. She obviously likes burning things.
A pyromaniac.
I know, but bizarrely. But now, I'm dreadful. If every now and then I think, oh, there's been a few more reviews, so I filter out and I just look at 5-star reviews, which is dreadful, really. But it's quite nice. Give yourself a little boost and go, ooh, without seeing, obviously, all the others. And like every other author, I get a great big mix of reviews. Some people like it, some people don't, and I think that's absolutely fair enough. It would be a boring old world if we all liked the same thing.
It would indeed, and I was never tempted to burn my iPhone while I was listening to your book, so that's fine.
Yes, that would be a bit extreme.
So you've gone from the world of lawyers and solicitors into the world of published authors, and I know your summer was a whirlwind of parties and events, including the Theakston Crime Festival.
Yes.
Now, these don't exactly look like a chore imposed by your publisher, so is it the whirlwind that it seems to be?
Yeah, I mean, there are 2 main crime festivals I've been to. One's called Crime Fest in Bristol, and last year I was on a couple of panels, which was great because obviously you're sort of saying to people, here I am, and people get to know you a little bit. But it's a bit scary as well, especially when you've been drinking in the bar from 2 a.m. the previous morning, and your slot's 9 o'clock in the morning. And so that's the downside. But it is good fun. And there are obviously authors and readers. And then the other event is the one in Harrogate you've mentioned. And that is particularly starry. So you get Lee Child and Val McDermott and Mark Billingham milling around. And they're dreadfully nice. They put up with us all and do, selfies and chat. And it is nice, actually, because I don't think they are the sort of wonderful best-selling authors and everyone else are the minions. They just muck in, and it's lovely. With obviously with other writers, but also with readers, so their fans are there. So it's great.
So I would imagine that the Theakston event in Harrogate, I would have thought you'd murder somebody, and then with all those crime writers, you'd try and work out who did it and where, a bit like real life Cluedo. But it's not like that at all, apparently.
No, we haven't. Well, not that I know of. But yeah, that would be fun, wouldn't it? If we had a real dead body on the lawn, but maybe not. But they actually have in Harrogate, it's rather nice. Down in the town centre, they have a few sort of, in the old spoof films where they used to do a body line.
Yes.
I don't know how to explain that, but they have them on the pavement every now and then, to support the festival.
Right.
So that's quite fun.
Now, you've already mentioned that you get involved in writing groups, and there are a few other techniques that you use to improve your writing. And I know you're a good advocate of reading out loud.
Yes, I think that really, really does help. Two things I think really help for me personally. One, if I read it out loud, because I think you hear repetition more when you read out loud. And another thing I do is when I want to edit a chapter, I send it to myself on Kindle. Well, I don't have an actual Kindle, but I have a Kindle app on an iPad. And for some reason, because that's in more book form than just a Word document on your screen. And again, you see that in a different way as well. So I'd say both those things are quite good for editing. And certainly going to your writing group and reading out loud, that's great, and getting your feedback. And also focuses the mind, doesn't it? Because before you go to the group and you think you might be reading a chapter, you check it before you go. So again, it's basically going back and back and back and back to the same document. And I think sometimes your eyes can glaze because you know it virtually off by heart, but that's the way to do it.
And have the writing group changed with you now being this big star of published author?
Well, obviously, I do arrive by helicopter, and no, not at all. Because there are in my group that there's a few published authors and a whole host of really, really talented writers, and it's luck, isn't it? I've been lucky. I've had the lucky break that hopefully they will have at some point too.
So you've this is now your career. So do you set yourself the discipline of a word count when you're working on a novel or anything like that?
No, I'm not very good at rules. Just in general, I'm not good at obeying rules in life. So I don't put myself under pressure. So it's just I do what I do, sort of thing. So if I've got a whole free day and my mind's in the right frame, I will write, and I don't even know how much I write in a day. Whereas I know friends of mine will go, right, I'm going to write 3,000 words today. And they're pleased when they do it. But if they don't do it, they're cross with themselves. So I'd rather not put pressure on myself, which is what I was saying earlier about, which is nice to have several manuscripts already completed. As fodder, for the future. So if tomorrow I just felt I couldn't write again, at least I've got a backlog.
So that would be the equivalent of you calling in sick to your own job as a writer.
That's it. Yes, yeah. So yeah. How do you do it, Mike? Because you work as well. So how do you do yours?
I really struggle to sit down and write. I mean, I'm writing a what was a short story, which is now moving into novella territory, called Clickbait. And as I've sort of written half of it, I've realised that the first half, there's so many things I need to change because of the way it's about Facebook and clicking things on Facebook. Don't ever do that. Don't ever click on things on Facebook. And when I started going back, I then thought, well, there's not enough depth to the story, and you get a bit muddled. And sometimes I think you just have to have a complete break and come back to it a week, 2 weeks, even a month later. And then all of a sudden it's a bit fresher. You probably spot more mistakes, but it's almost like a clean break and a clean restart.
Yeah, I think that is a good idea. Yeah, I think is when you get in that sort of mind fog and just a bit frustrated, just walk away, like you say. It's a good idea.
Now, your family was a big part of your decision to go writing, and I've seen some articles where you fondly speak about the water parks and the River Mersey in the area where you live. Now, when I was a kid growing up, the River Mersey was so polluted that you didn't go anywhere near it, and there was talk of rats that could rip your throat out that lived down there. And that was in Ashton upon Mersey, which is only just down the river from where you are. So have you noticed a lot of environmental changes in the area around you?
Well, obviously, I've never had a rat jumping out at me. I've missed out on that experience. Although I did read Rats, the James Herbert novel
Yes,
years ago.
absolutely, yeah.
And we were all frightened to death of rats because they were giant size, his rats,
They,
weren't they? So maybe they were from the River Mersey. I must admit, sort of the section I walk along, it's really lovely. So I don't know if they've done things environmentally to make it better. I've no idea, but I have to say it is really, really a lovely place. So if anyone is in South Manchester and wants to go for a walk, go along the Mersey. It's really lovely.
yes, it was one of the most polluted rivers, certainly in the north of England, but they have done a lot of work clearing it up, and it is quite a pleasant experience now.
Yeah, well, clearly it's worked then. That's fabulous.
So, your social media presence has grown and grown, and there's random pictures of you everywhere. I didn't quite get the Christmas picture on cover reveal day. I was expecting Santa. So, is social media something that you've kind of fallen into, or you make a special effort, or is it just something that you do anyway?
Not really. I mean, I was always, on Facebook because Facebook's good for, except clickbait, obviously. It's just good fun for chatting with friends and whatnot. And I never really got Twitter. But you're advised as an author to keep an online presence, and really the ideal apparently is to tweet about 3 times a day and to do Facebook at least once a day, and so on and so forth. And I go through phases because it's very time consuming. And I think the reason when I link my Instagram account with my author page, so things go through, and I think you saw a picture on my author page, which I just put on Instagram, because obviously for that you need a photograph to hang a sentence on.
Yes.
So I think that's why I was being confusing. But I think it's great social media, but, I hope I'm not getting, making people too fed up with seeing me. But hopefully it's so quick, isn't it?
It is. It is. And
a tweet lasts 20 seconds or something ridiculous.
Yeah, and Twitter's even more brief. Once you've tweeted something, unless lots of people retweet it, then it's gone.
Yeah.
And I do know that people, some of the authors that I speak to are absolute Twitter addicts and won't use Facebook, and obviously vice versa. So it is what it is, and it's here to stay. So I think people will get used to it, or they won't.
Yeah. And you just scroll over it. If you don't like it, you just scroll on by, don't you? But some people, of course, can't, hold themselves back. They can't scroll on by. They get annoyed about things. Fair enough. It's whatever. Because you see some debates on Twitter, don't you? And I try not to comment because you can embroil yourself. But some people get really quite opinionated about things.
Keyboard warriors.
But it's something to read, isn't it?
Keyboard warriors are the absolute worst.
Yeah, yeah.
So you had some quite remarkable events to launch My Husband's Lies. And I know one of them was in a small library just down the road from where I grew up, the Coppice Library.
Yes.
So what's been your favourite launch event or book signing?
Oh, difficult. I mean, there've been so many good ones, but what I like is, for example, at the Coppice Library, they were mainly, I think they were all women, and what I like to do is sort of engage people, because they don't want to just sit there and just have to listen and not participate. So I get a conversation going, and it's fabulous. A lot of them are sort of older ladies, and they're such fun, and they've got funny stories themselves. And so they're really great events because you get a good conversation going. But I've done quite a few things that I've really enjoyed, where the audience get involved or ask me questions. I like the question and answer sessions, like you are doing now, Mike.
Oh, you're too kind. You're too kind.
No, but it's more engaging for the listener, I think, if they're not just hearing one person drone on. As I say, I think all the conversations are the best.
So you do these radio shows, book signings, magazine interviews. Who manages your calendar?
Oh, just me. Yes, it sounds very glamorous, doesn't it? But no, it's just me putting them in. I think they all come in a clump, and then for ages you're doing nothing. So yeah, I think I've got a few events sort of coming up in the next few months. For example, I've just been asked to go on a panel for the Newcastle Crime Noir at the library, so that's very nice. a trip to Newcastle.
Right.
And yeah.
Yeah.
And I think a noir at the bar in Manchester is one's coming up in April. I've been invited to that one as well, so that'll be good. I think they're the noir at the bar in Manchester is readings. I think you get lots of crime authors reading sections from the book.
Right. Okay. So you will be talking about Betray Her up there, and obviously My Husband's Lies is technically your latest novel.
Yes. Yeah.
And as you now create a back catalogue, have you found that, for instance, when My Husband's Lies was launched, it had an effect on Beneath the Skin?
Yes, yeah, which is one of the reasons when My Husband's Lies was hurtling up the Kindle charts, that's why they changed the title of Beneath the Skin to The Wife's Secret. And you can see why, a wife book and a husband book. So yes, I think it had an impact. And I think it has been great actually, because Beneath the Skin / The Wife's Secret, it has, made a bit of a comeback, which is great, because you sort of, as an author, you love all your novels, and you sort of, it's really rewarding that they're, doing well. And I just got up to yesterday 200 reviews on Amazon for The Wife's Secret, so that was a nice round number.
Fantastic, yes, that is a nice round number.
Yes.
I found a piece online that was, it might have been from your blog, but it was about the tips to help writers. And one of them was about chapters. So you mentioned before about chapters in your Beneath the Skin. And when I was listening to it, I wasn't really aware that chapters were starting and ending, even though the narrator was saying chapter 4, chapter 5, chapter 6. But when you're reading, I think that's very different, because you've got a page to turn at the end of a chapter. And you write a chapter and you end a chapter. Your tip is you end a chapter so that the person reading wants to read the next chapter. So do you sometimes end a chapter just because you've got a great line, or how do you decide where a chapter ends?
Yeah, that's a tricky one, isn't it? Because I don't like it when sometimes I think some books it feels a little bit forced. The da 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 at the end of the chapter, cliffhanger. Whereas I try and make it not too forced. And I think with me with chapters, it's just like a breathing space normally. But I used to write longer chapters, whereas now I sort of, if there is a breathing space, I'll go on to a new chapter, a new page, because I think for pace, people feel it's a quicker read if the chapters are that a little bit shorter. Whereas obviously some literary fiction books have very, very long chapters, don't they? And that's your expectation.
I think that's right, yeah. When you're reading a book that's got short chapters, you're even more tempted to go, I'll just read one more chapter before I go to bed.
Yes, yeah. And they're sort of like, so I think it's psychologically, it feels more like a flow. But I certainly think if it's the end of a scene of that day, if you can sort of leave it on a bit of a da-da-da-da, but not too much of a da-da-da, I think it does keep the reader going, and the reader wants to go to the next one. Whereas if I read some literary fiction, and I really enjoy it, but I feel before bed, I feel, right, well, I'll pick that up whenever I pick it up. There isn't that compulsion to sort of like, oh no, I've got to read, I need to know what's happening to the next one. So I think that's part of the art of a thriller, isn't it? It's being page turning, sufficient intrigue for people to go, no, actually, I want to know now what's going to happen.
Now, another tip, which is, to me, this is one of the hardest things, is the realistic dialogue. I think a lot of people sort of write dialogue, and it is nothing like people would speak in real life. So how do you ensure that your dialogue is realistic?
Well, I try and make it as realistic as I can. But having said that, even though I try, obviously, people in real life, you all interrupt each other, don't you? And then you sort of have a pause, or like I'm now ums and ahs, and so it can't be completely realistic, can it? But I like to try and make my dialogue, my characters. It is fiction, obviously, but I like to try and make everything as realistic and real life as it is. And I think someone said the way I write is quite chatty, in a way, if you know what I mean. So I suppose it's quite intimate and chatty the way I write. So I suppose that also influences it as well.
Well, you made a very good point that unless you're actually making a speech, when you're chatting, you'll very rarely finish a sentence.
Yeah, absolutely. And then that'd make it hard. I'm sure if we transcribed what we're saying at the moment, it'd be really, really long, wouldn't it? You'd have to. It'd be tough on the eye to read it all.
It would. And the other thing that people fall into the mistake of is to try and describe what's just been said. So, for instance, he said apologetically, or she shouted, or whatever it might be. And this goes back to show not tell in a little way, in that you have to try and make the words such that you don't need to describe what's just been said.
Yes. Yeah. I think we all slip into the the ly words, don't we? Because sometimes you just want to add that, and I think technically you shouldn't have to. The context should. But I still slip a few in because I quite like the rhythm of writing. So I quite like it to feel rhythmically. I like the way that it sounds. I don't like it if it doesn't feel finished. The sentence. This sounds a bit crazy, but so I think sometimes I'll add on things because for rhythm. But yes, that is another way to pare down your writing, is to cut out all those things. But I think even the most brilliant writers in the land do add, adverbs, adjectives, and all the things they shouldn't add.
They absolutely do. I read or listened to again Salem's Lot by Stephen King, one of his older novels. And that is a litany of ly words.
Yeah.
All the way through, with almost every speech, there's an ly word. And if it's good enough for Stephen King, I wouldn't advocate doing it everywhere, but I think you can certainly get a little bit too hung up on the rules as dictated by anyone who's there to give advice. But a bit of variety, I think.
Yeah, I think that's another sort of writing tip. I think try and jumble everything up. I think try and do long sentences and shorter sentences, and try and do different language, as long as your language isn't going purple, as they say. Try different things, and try sometimes to say she said at the end, or maybe not put it, or put it at the beginning of a sentence. I think just jumble things up a little bit.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I think there are rules, but they're more guidelines than rules.
Yeah, I think so.
Right,
I hope so.
We're going to go off at a bit of a tangent now, and I know when you've been on the radio with us before, you've answered these. I've not got the answers in front of me, so you can choose whatever you want here, but I think I might know the answer to the first one. What's your favourite pop group or singer?
Well, currently, and it has been for a long time, is I love the Stereophonics. But I hope you're not referring to the Bay City Rollers from when I was 8.
Of course.
But I'm a big fan of the Stereophonics, Oasis. I'm still stuck a few years ago, but the Stereophonics are still going strong and writing fabulous songs. And Kelly Jones's voice is just amazing. And in fact, Betray Her, one of the characters listens to the Stereophonics. I thought I've got to get them in there.
Writer's privilege, I guess.
Yes.
So what is or was your favourite kids' TV programme?
Oh, that's a tricky one. I think we're going back to, I think I've recently put on Starsky and Hutch on a picture. I found an old Starsky and Hutch programme magazine thing, but it didn't half smell. You know, that fusty, awful smell.
Oh, right, yes.
Yeah. But then that was overtaken by the professionals. Remember Bodie and Doyle?
Yes, I do remember them, yes.
So I think I like that even better. Because it was obviously set in the UK.
But the cars weren't as good, I don't think.
But Lewis Collins had a good eyebrow.
He did indeed, yes.
Eyebrow.
And what was the other guy? Was it Martin Shaw?
Yeah, that's it, yes.
So the next one's probably very difficult. What was your favourite book?
Oh, that is difficult. I think a safe one to come back to is... I often say a poetry book called The Rattlebag, which is edited by Seamus Heaney and Ted Hughes. And Seamus Heaney and Ted Hughes are my two favourite poets. And that's a fantastic book because it is a rattlebag and you can just dip in. And it's an eclectic poems, from all years, all people. So if you like poetry, I really like that. But an actual novel, I suppose I'd go for something safe and say something like Jane Eyre, just because it's always a great story. And if they ever do an adaptation on TV, I'm there like a shot and I'll watch it. And that was a domestic noir, wasn't it, all those years ago?
It was indeed probably one of the earlier examples of it. And I was talking to our mutual friend Donna at Cafe 110 only 2 days ago, and she was talking about the book Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier and Wuthering Heights, which are her favourite.
Yeah, and that's another one, another domestic noir, isn't it?
Yes, indeed, yes. So moving on to the fourth question, and this may have changed over the last few months as you've rubbed shoulders with the great and the good. Who's your favourite celebrity?
Ooh, that is a tricky one. One I've actually met. I did think Lee Child was so lovely because I sort of sheepishly went up to him and sort of said, "Oh, could I give you my book?" This was My Husband's Lies. And instead of running away, which he could have done, he was really gracious and said, "Of course, I'd be delighted. Please, will you sign it for me?" And so he asked me to sign it. And then he said, "Can we have a photograph?" So the sort of official photographer came and took a photograph. But the annoying thing was, like an idiot, I was so excited. I've got my book between us the wrong way round. So you can't even see the title. So that was a big opportunity miss. But yeah, he was a super guy, really lovely.
You need to get somebody to Photoshop that for you.
Yes, that's it, yeah. Superimpose all the books on it.
And the last one is, what's your favourite food?
Oh, well, it has to be nuts. Everyone who knows me, nuts. I went for dinner to my friend's house with a group of other friends on Wednesday, and every course had nuts in. She goes, for you, Kaz. She calls me Kaz. For you, Kaz, it's got nuts in. So the starter, main course, and dessert were all nut-based.
I've just made some cereal bars with lots and lots of nuts in them.
Oh, they sound delicious. Lovely.
Yeah.
Well, I'll have one of them.
I've made them before, and they've always either been a bit crumbly or a bit gooey, but these came out really, really well.
What do you glue them together with?
It's a mixture of honey and almond butter.
Oh, nice. I didn't know you could get an almond. I know you can get almond milk. I suppose it's the same thing. Almond butter.
Yeah, so a lot of people use peanut butter, but I'm not a big fan of peanut butter. But if you go into Tesco's or Asda when you're looking for your book, on the peanut butter shelves, you may find almond butter. Some places don't have it, but it's quite rare, but it's well worth using. And then sometimes, if I'm making them, I put flax in there, but it's never been too effective for me to glue them together. It's always the lots of honey and lots of almond butter.
Oh, sounds lovely. I'm going to try that.
I'll email you the recipe.
Oh, please do.
So we're coming to the end of our podcast time now. So just tell the listeners a little bit more about where they can find out about Caroline England and where they can find a bit more about Betray Her.
Right, okay. So I do have a website. I'm not great at keeping it up to date, but I did a little tweak the other day. So my website is www.carolineenglandauthor.co.uk. And I'm on Twitter at Kaz England. So it's capital CAZ and then England, capital E, England. And I have an author page on Facebook, which you'll probably quite easily find if you just put in Caroline England Author. Then you get more information on Amazon, which will give you you'll see the lovely new cover for Betray Her, which I'm delighted with. And you can pre-order the Kindle. So that's all set up there. And obviously it will give you the blurb I've already given you, which isn't much, but hopefully it's sufficiently intriguing for people to buy it. And and it has all my other books on Amazon as well. And if you go in an Asda store and find My Husband's Lies, please send me a photograph.
You will hopefully be inundated.
Yes, that'd be lovely.
It's been wonderful to talk to you as ever, Caroline. And I'm going to ask you one more question before we go. I saw a tweet once which said, what would you say to your 16-year-old self? So what would you say to your 16-year-old self?
Yeah, that is a tricky one. 16. I don't know. I think be more confident, actually, because my girls are all, well, they seem so much more confident than I was at a 16-year-old. I think believe in yourself, be confident, you can do it.
You can do it. That is a very apt way to finish the show. It's been wonderful having you on, and look forward to the launch of Betray Her, and hopefully you'll come back onto the Arts Show and tell us all about it. You've been listening to the Arts Show podcast with Mike Madden. Come back soon for more artists, authors, musicians and anyone else connected with the arts. We're going to play out with Mike Sanchez and I Don't Stand a Chance.
Baby, you hiding something that you don't want me to know, because I'm getting a vibe from way down the side, like you're just about ready to go. Can't tell me where you stayed last night. You just can't cope with treating me right. I'm on the road to heartbreak. Now's the time to tell me so, because I'm getting a chill like I'm gonna be ill. I know you don't want me no more. I won't be satisfied with your little white lies. Girl, I've only just begun to realize I don't stand a chance. I don't stand a chance. You don't wanna know and I can't make you dance. Well, I'll say goodbye. Find yourself another guy. I wish you were mine, but I'm losing my mind. I don't stand a chance. But you don't wanna love this man. Am I on the road to heartbreak? Now's the time to tell me so, because I'm getting a chill like I'm gonna be ill. I know you don't want me no more. I won't be satisfied with your little white lies. Girl, I've only just begun to realize I don't stand a chance. No, I don't stand a chance. You don't wanna know and I can't make you dance. Well, I'll say goodbye. Find yourself another guy. I wish you were mine, but I'm losing my mind. I don't stand a chance.